The wind howled through the dense forest, carrying with it the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves. Somewhere in the distance, an owl hooted, its mournful cry echoing through the night. The moon hung low in the sky, casting an eerie silver glow over the landscape. It was a night like any other, yet something felt off. The air was thick with an unspoken tension, as if the very trees were holding their breath, waiting for something to happen. In the heart of the forest, hidden beneath layers of moss and ivy, lay an ancient stone altar. Its surface was etched with strange symbols, their meanings long forgotten by time. The altar was the centerpiece of a forgotten ritual, a ritual so dark and dangerous that it had been erased from history. But some secrets refused to stay buried, and tonight, the past would come alive once more. Body. The story begins in a small, secluded village nestled deep within the forest. The villagers lived simple lives, far removed from the hustle and bustle of the modern world. They were a superstitious lot, whispering tales of curses and spirits around their hearths at night. Among these tales was one that stood out, a story so terrifying that it was rarely spoken aloud. It was the story of the forbidden ritual. According to legend, the ritual was performed centuries ago by a group of villagers who sought to gain unimaginable power. They believed that by sacrificing a pure soul to the ancient gods, they could unlock the secrets of the universe. But something went horribly wrong. The ritual unleashed a malevolent force that consumed the village, leaving behind only death and despair. The survivors, terrified of what they had unleashed, vowed to erase all traces of the ritual from history. But secrets have a way of resurfacing, especially when they are buried in fear. The protagonist of our story is a young woman named Eliza, a historian with a fascination for the occult. Eliza had spent years researching the forbidden ritual, piecing together fragments of information from ancient texts and oral histories. Her obsession had led her to the village, where she hoped to uncover the truth behind the legend. Eliza arrived in the village on a crisp autumn morning, the air filled with the scent of wood smoke and fallen leaves. The villagers were wary of outsiders, especially those who asked too many questions. But Eliza was determined. She rented a small cottage on the edge of the forest and began her investigation. Her first breakthrough came when she discovered an old diary hidden in the attic of the cottage. The diary belonged to a woman named Margaret, who had lived in the village over 200 years ago. Margaret's writings were filled with fear and desperation, as if she were trying to warn future generations of the dangers that lurked in the forest. Eliza spent hours poring over the diary, her heart racing as she deciphered the faded ink. Margaret spoke of a hidden altar deep within the forest, where the forbidden ritual had taken place. She described the symbols etched into the stone, symbols that were said to hold the key to unlocking the ritual's power. But Margaret also warned of the consequences, of the darkness that would be unleashed if the ritual were ever performed again. Eliza's curiosity was piqued. She knew she had to find the altar, to see it with her own eyes. Armed with a map she had drawn based on Margaret's descriptions, she set out into the forest. The forest was a labyrinth of twisted trees and tangled undergrowth, the sunlight barely penetrating the dense canopy. Eliza followed the map as best she could, her footsteps muffled by the thick layer of leaves beneath her feet. The deeper she went, the more oppressive the atmosphere became. It was as if the forest itself was alive, watching her every move. After hours of searching, Eliza finally stumbled upon the altar. It was exactly as Margaret had described, a massive stone slab covered in strange symbols. The air around it was unnaturally cold, and Eliza could feel a sense of dread creeping over her. She knew she should turn back, but her curiosity got the better of her. As she approached the altar, she noticed something strange. The symbols seemed to glow faintly, as if they were alive. Eliza reached out to touch one, and as soon as her fingers made contact, a jolt of electricity shot through her body. She stumbled back, her heart pounding in her chest. Suddenly, the forest was filled with a low, guttural growl. Eliza spun around, her eyes scanning the shadows. She could feel something watching her, something ancient and malevolent. The growl grew louder, closer, until it seemed to be right behind her. Eliza's instincts screamed at her to run, but her legs felt like they were rooted to the spot. She could see movement in the shadows, a dark, shapeless form slowly emerging from the trees. It was unlike anything she had ever seen, a creature of pure darkness with glowing red eyes. The creature lunged at her, and Eliza finally found the strength to move. She turned and ran, her heart pounding in her chest as she stumbled through the forest. The creature was close behind, its growls echoing in her ears. Eliza could feel its breath on her neck, its claws reaching out to grab her. Just as she thought she was about to be caught, Eliza burst into a clearing. The sunlight was blinding after the darkness of the forest, and she shielded her eyes with her hand. When she looked back, the creature was gone, as if it had never existed. Eliza collapsed to the ground, her body trembling with fear and exhaustion. She knew she had stumbled upon something far more dangerous than she had ever imagined. The forbidden ritual was real, and the darkness it had unleashed was still out there, waiting. Conclusion. Eliza's discovery had opened a door to a world of terror, a world she was now a part of. She knew she couldn't ignore what she had seen, couldn't pretend it hadn't happened. The forbidden ritual was real, and the darkness it had unleashed was still out there, waiting. As she made her way back to the village, Eliza couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. The forest seemed darker, more menacing, as if it knew her secret. She knew she had to find a way to stop the ritual, to put an end to the darkness before it consumed her. But how do you fight something that has been erased from history? How do you defeat a force that thrives on fear and despair? Eliza didn't have the answers, but she knew one thing for certain: the forbidden ritual was far from over. And so, with a heavy heart and a mind filled with dread, Eliza prepared herself for the battle to come. The forest had claimed many victims over the centuries, and she was determined not to be one of them. But as the shadows closed in around her, she couldn't help but wonder if she was already too late. The forbidden ritual had been erased from history, but its legacy lived on. And now, Eliza was a part of that legacy, whether she wanted to be or not. The forbidden ritual they tried to erase from history. The village was eerily quiet as Eliza made her way back to her cottage. The sun had set, and the streets were empty, the only sound the soft crunch of her footsteps on the gravel path. The villagers had always been wary of outsiders, but now their suspicions seemed to have turned to outright hostility. Eliza could feel their eyes on her as she passed by, their whispers following her like a shadow. She knew she had to be careful. The villagers had gone to great lengths to erase the forbidden ritual from history, and they wouldn't take kindly to someone digging up their dark past. But Eliza couldn't stop now. She had seen the creature, felt its malevolent presence. She knew the ritual was real, and she couldn't ignore the danger it posed. As she reached her cottage, Eliza noticed something strange. The door was slightly ajar, and the windows were dark. She was sure she had locked the door before she left, and she never left the windows open. Her heart began to race as she pushed the door open and stepped inside. The cottage was in disarray, furniture overturned, books and papers scattered across the floor. Someone had been here, searching for something. Eliza's mind raced as she tried to make sense of the scene. Who would break into her cottage? And what were they looking for? Her eyes fell on the old diary she had found in the attic. It was lying open on the table, the pages filled with Margaret's frantic handwriting. Eliza picked it up, her hands trembling as she flipped through the pages. She had read the diary before, but now the words seemed to take on a new meaning. Margaret had warned of the consequences of the forbidden ritual, of the darkness that would be unleashed if it were ever performed again. But she had also spoken of a way to stop it, a way to banish the darkness back to the void from whence it came. Eliza's heart skipped a beat as she realized what the intruders had been looking for. They were after the diary. Eliza knew she had to act fast. If the intruders were after the diary, it meant they knew about the ritual, and they were willing to do whatever it took to keep it hidden. She couldn't stay in the village. It was too dangerous. She had to find a way to stop the ritual, to put an end to the darkness before it consumed her. But where could she go? The forest was no longer safe, and she couldn't trust the villagers. Eliza's mind raced as she tried to come up with a plan. She needed help, someone who knew about the occult, someone who could help her decipher the symbols on the altar. And then it hit her. There was a man, a recluse who lived on the outskirts of the village. The villagers called him a madman, but Eliza had heard rumors that he was an expert in ancient rituals and symbols. If anyone could help her, it was him. Eliza packed a bag with the essentials, including the diary, and set out into the night. The forest was even more foreboding in the dark, the trees casting long, twisted shadows across the path. Eliza's heart pounded in her chest as she made her way through the woods, her senses on high alert. She reached the recluse's cabin just as the first light of dawn was breaking through the trees. The cabin was small and dilapidated, its windows covered with thick curtains. Eliza hesitated for a moment before knocking on the door. There was no answer. She knocked again, louder this time. Still no answer. Eliza's heart sank. What if the recluse was gone? What if she was too late? Just as she was about to turn away, the door creaked open. A man stood in the doorway, his face hidden in shadow. He was tall and thin, with long, unkempt hair and a beard that reached down to his chest. His eyes were sharp and piercing, and they seemed to look right through her. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice low and gravelly. "My name is Eliza," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I need your help. I found something in the forest, something unnatural." The man's eyes narrowed. "What did you find?" Eliza hesitated for a moment before pulling the diary from her bag. "This," she said, holding it out to him. It belonged to a woman named Margaret. She wrote about a ritual, a forbidden ritual that took place in the forest. "I think it's real, and I think it's happening again." The man took the diary from her and flipped through the pages, his eyes scanning the words. His expression grew darker with each page he read. Finally, he looked up at Eliza, his eyes filled with a mixture of fear and determination. "You're right," he said. "The ritual is real, and it's more dangerous than you can imagine. If it's happening again, we need to stop it before it's too late." Eliza felt a surge of relief. She wasn't alone anymore. "What do we need to do?" she asked. The man's expression grew grim. "We need to perform a counter-ritual," he said. "But it won't be easy. The symbols on the altar are ancient and powerful, and they won't give up their secrets easily. We'll need to decipher them, and then we'll need to find a way to banish the darkness back to the void." Eliza nodded, her determination growing. "I'll do whatever it takes," she said. The man studied her for a moment before nodding. "Very well," he said. "But know this, the path we're about to take is dangerous, and there's no guarantee we'll succeed. The darkness is powerful, and it will do everything in its power to stop us." Eliza took a deep breath, steeling herself for the challenges ahead. "I understand," she said. "But I can't let this continue. I have to try." The man nodded, a flicker of respect in his eyes. "Then let's get to work," he said. Conclusion. Eliza and the recluse spent the next few days poring over the diary and the symbols on the altar. The man, whose name was Samuel, was a wealth of knowledge, and he helped Eliza decipher the ancient symbols. But as they worked, Eliza couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The forest seemed to grow darker with each passing day, the shadows deeper and more menacing. Eliza could feel the presence of the creature, lurking just out of sight, waiting for the right moment to strike. But she couldn't let fear stop her. She had to see this through, no matter the cost. The forbidden ritual had been erased from history, but its legacy lived on. And now, Eliza was a part of that legacy. As they prepared to perform the counter-ritual, Eliza couldn't help but wonder if they were already too late. The darkness was growing stronger, and she could feel its malevolent presence closing in around her. But she couldn't give up. She had to fight, for herself, for the village, and for the countless souls who had been lost to the forbidden ritual. The battle was far from over, and Eliza knew that the darkness would not go quietly. But she was ready. She had to be. The forbidden ritual had been erased from history, but its legacy lived on. And now, Eliza was a part of that legacy, whether she wanted to be or not. The forbidden ritual they tried to erase from history. The night was thick with tension as Eliza and Samuel prepared to perform the counter-ritual. The forest was eerily silent, the usual sounds of nocturnal creatures absent, as if they too sensed the impending danger. The air was heavy with the scent of damp earth and the faint, acrid tang of something burning. Eliza's heart pounded in her chest as she gathered the necessary items. Candles, herbs, and a small, intricately carved box that Samuel had retrieved from a hidden compartment in his cabin. Samuel had explained that the counter-ritual required precise timing and exacting conditions. They had to perform it at the stroke of midnight, under a full moon, at the exact location where the original forbidden ritual had taken place. Any deviation could result in failure, or worse, the unleashing of even greater darkness. Eliza's hands trembled as she placed the candles in a circle around the altar. The symbols etched into the stone seemed to pulse with a faint, malevolent glow, as if they were alive and aware of what was about to happen. She could feel the weight of the forest pressing in on her, the shadows closing in, waiting for the right moment to strike. Samuel stood at the edge of the circle, his eyes closed, murmuring an incantation under his breath. His voice was low and steady, but Eliza could hear the tension in it, the fear that he was trying to hide. She knew that he was just as scared as she was, but he was determined to see this through. As the final candle was lit, Samuel opened his eyes and looked at Eliza. "It's time," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Remember, once we start, there's no turning back. The darkness will try to stop us, but we must stay focused. Do not let it break your concentration." Eliza nodded, her throat too dry to speak. She took her place in the circle, her heart racing as Samuel began the counter-ritual. The counter-ritual began with a series of chants, ancient words that seemed to resonate with the very fabric of the forest. The air grew colder, the shadows deeper, as Samuel's voice rose and fell in a rhythmic cadence. Eliza could feel the power of the words, the way they seemed to vibrate through her body, filling her with a strange, otherworldly energy. But as the ritual progressed, the darkness began to fight back. The candles flickered and sputtered, their flames dancing erratically as if caught in an unseen wind. The symbols on the altar glowed brighter, their light casting eerie shadows on the trees surrounding them. Eliza could feel the presence of the creature, its malevolent energy pressing in on her, trying to break her concentration. Samuel's voice grew louder, more insistent, as he fought to maintain control of the ritual. Eliza could see the strain on his face, the sweat beading on his forehead as he struggled to keep the darkness at bay. She knew that they were running out of time, that the creature was growing stronger with each passing moment. And then, just as the ritual reached its climax, the creature appeared. It emerged from the shadows, its form shifting and twisting, a mass of darkness with glowing red eyes. It moved with a terrifying speed, its claws reaching out for Eliza, its growl filling the air with a sound that seemed to come from the very depths of hell. Eliza's heart raced as she tried to stay focused, to keep her mind on the ritual. But the creature was too close, its presence too overwhelming. She could feel its breath on her neck, its claws inches from her skin. And then, just as the creature was about to strike, Samuel's voice rose in a final, desperate chant. The candles flared, their flames shooting up into the night sky, and the symbols on the altar glowed with an intense, blinding light. The creature let out a deafening roar, its form writhing and twisting as it was consumed by the light. Eliza could feel the power of the ritual, the way it seemed to tear at the very fabric of reality, pulling the darkness back into the void from whence it came. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, it was over. The candles flickered and died, their flames extinguished in an instant. The symbols on the altar faded, their light gone, leaving only the cold, dark stone. The forest was silent once more, the creature gone, as if it had never existed. Eliza collapsed to the ground, her body trembling with exhaustion and relief. She could feel the weight of the darkness lifting, the oppressive atmosphere of the forest dissipating. She knew that they had succeeded.